She is using this illness as an excuse. My mother-in-law said it in a voice calm enough to sound respectable, but loud enough for every person in the courtroom to hear. Patricia Bennett sat behind my husband with her gloved hands folded in her lap, dressed as if she had come to church instead of a divorce hearing, and she looked directly at the judge when she said it, as though she were offering him helpful information instead of cutting the last thin thread of dignity I had left. Mark did not correct her. He did not even look embarrassed. He only lowered his eyes and gave that small, tired shake of his head, the one that told everyone he was the patient husband, and I was the problem he had endured for too long. I tried to stand straighter beside my attorney, because old habits do not leave you just because the uniform is hanging in a closet. I had spent 27 years in the United States Army. I had stood in heat, rain, sand, command briefings, casualty meetings, and rooms where one missing shipment could mean someone did not make it through the night. I knew how to keep my face still. I knew how to breathe through pressure. But that morning, inside a family court in San Antonio, with my husband pretending not to know me and his mother calling my pain a performance, I felt something tighten inside my chest so sharply that for a second I forgot where I was. My name is Claire Bennett. I am 53 years old, a retired Army lieutenant colonel, and for most of my adult life, I worked in medical logistics. That phrase never sounded impressive to people who needed uniforms to come with explosions before they respected them. Medical logistics meant blood reached surgical tents before the sun went down. It meant antibiotics survived the heat because refrigeration units were where they were supposed to be. It meant field hospitals had fuel, sterile gloves, oxygen regulators, water purification kits, generators, trauma packs, transport routes, and backup plans for the backup routes. It meant surgeons could operate, nurses could stabilize, medics could move, and patients had a chance. But in the Bennett family, it meant I was just supply. 4 months before that courtroom, I still believed my marriage could be repaired. Mark and I lived in a 2-story brick house on the north side of San Antonio, 20 minutes from Joint Base San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston, close enough that I could still hear aircraft some mornings and feel a strange ache of belonging. I had retired the year before, after one final ceremony where soldiers I had mentored hugged me so hard I nearly lost my breath. Mark had stood beside me that day with one arm around my waist, smiling for photographs, telling people how proud he was. I believed him. Maybe he believed himself then. That is one of the cruelest parts of remembering a marriage after it breaks. You cannot always separate the lies from the moments that were real. After retirement, our house became too quiet. I missed the rhythm of work more than I admitted. I missed the early calls, the impossible lists, the sense that if I solved one problem quickly enough, someone miles away might live long enough to see their family again. Mark said I needed to learn how to relax, but he never seemed relaxed himself. He had left his regional management job with a medical equipment distributor and started spending more time with his younger brother, Ryan, who had founded a small company called Bennett Medical Systems. Patricia called Ryan the visionary of the family. She said it so often it began to sound like part of his name. Ryan the visionary. Ryan the builder. Ryan the one taking risks. Ryan the man who would finally put the Bennett name on something important. Patricia never said I had done nothing important. She was too polished for that. She preferred smaller blades. Claire was very organized in the Army, she would tell dinner guests, smiling. That was her gift. Someone had to keep track of all those boxes. Or, Mark sacrificed so much while she was away serving. People forget the spouse who stays behind. I never argued with the second sentence because there was truth in it. Mark had sacrificed. Military spouses do. But Patricia used truth like a hook. She placed it gently, then pulled until it hurt. At first, Mark would change the subject. Then he stopped. Then he began agreeing with her in little ways. If I mentioned an old colleague becoming a hospital administrator, he would say, "Claire, not everything has to go back to the Army." If I questioned whether Ryan's company was ready for federal contracts, he would smile tightly and say, "You handled supplies, not business strategy." The first time he said it, I laughed because I thought he was teasing. He was not. Our Sunday dinners became the stage where the family roles were performed. Patricia sat at the head of the dining table even in our house, because somehow she had claimed that chair over the years. Mark sat to her right. Ryan usually arrived late, expensive watch visible, phone in hand, apologizing loudly about investor calls. His wife, Elise, rarely said much. She had the careful stillness of someone who had learned that truth was expensive in that family. One rainy evening in March, Ryan came in glowing with confidence. He tossed his car keys onto the sideboard and announced that Bennett Medical Systems was weeks away from a partnership that could open doors into military health networks. Patricia clapped her hands like he had just returned from war. Mark poured him bourbon. I listened quietly while Ryan described portable diagnostic units, sterilization modules, emergency deployment packages, and refrigerated storage containers supposedly designed for crisis response. The words sounded impressive, but some of the details were wrong. Not slightly wrong. Dangerously wrong. Ryan, I said carefully, what temperature range are those cold chain containers certified to maintain during transport? He blinked at me. What? For blood products and certain medications. If you are marketing them for field hospital use, the certification matters. The table went still in that familiar way. Not because I had been rude, but because I had interrupted the worship service. Ryan gave a short laugh. Claire, come on, we have engineers for that. I'm sure you do. I'm only saying the requirements are stricter than civilian buyers sometimes realize. Patricia set down her fork. This is a family dinner. I know, I said. I'm trying to help. Ryan leaned back, smiling now. No offense, Claire, but you were a supply officer. You were not a doctor. Mark laughed softly under his breath. That laugh landed harder than Ryan's words. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to say, she knows what she's talking about. He did not. Instead, he rubbed his forehead and said, Claire, please do not turn dinner into an inspection. I remember looking down at my plate, at the roast Patricia had said needed more salt, at the wine glass I had barely touched, at my own hands folded in my lap like a woman trying not to make a scene in her own home. There are moments in a marriage when something breaks without making a sound. That was one of them. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my record. I did not list the field hospitals, emergency deployments, hurricane responses, trauma supply chains, or nights I had spent on secure calls while Mark slept 3 rooms away. I simply said, you are right. This is dinner. Patricia smiled as if peace had been restored. Ryan began talking again. Mark reached for the bourbon, and I sat there feeling, for the first time in nearly 30 years, like a guest at a table I had helped pay for, inside a house I had helped build, beside a man who had decided my silence was easier than my truth. The health problems began around that time, though, if I am honest, the signs had started earlier. I tired too easily. Stairs felt longer than they used to. Some mornings my chest felt heavy before I even got out of bed. I blamed retirement, stress, age, bad sleep, anything but the possibility that something was truly wrong. When I mentioned it to Mark, he barely looked up from his phone. You need structure, he said. You are not sick, Claire. You are restless. Patricia was less kind. Women like you do not know what to do when nobody is saluting anymore, she told me one afternoon while opening my pantry without asking. The body invents drama when the mind misses attention. I should have called a doctor that day. Instead, I said nothing. The army had trained me to listen to data, to trust symptoms, to act early before a small failure became a fatal one. But it had not trained me for the quiet exhaustion of being disbelieved at home. That night, after Ryan's dinner announcement, I woke around 2 a.m. and found Mark's side of the bed empty. A blue light glowed beneath the study door. I walked down the hall, one hand against the wall because the pressure in my chest had returned, dull but present. When I opened the study door, Mark snapped his laptop shut so quickly the sound cracked through the room. What are you doing? I asked. He turned in his chair. Work. You retired from work. Consulting. For Ryan? His face tightened. Go back to bed, Claire. I looked past him. The laptop was closed, but a printed folder lay beside it. I saw only the top page before he slid another paper over it. Bennett Medical Systems. Emergency capital transfer pending. I stood there in my robe, my heart beating too fast, my husband staring at me like I was an intruder. And for the first time I understood that the thing happening in my marriage was bigger than hurt feelings. Something was being moved. Something was being hidden. And somehow, I had become the obstacle in my own life. The next morning, Mark acted as though nothing had happened. He came downstairs in a pressed blue shirt, made coffee, kissed the side of my head, and asked whether I wanted eggs. That was what frightened me most, not anger, not denial, normalcy. In the army, when a convoy hit an unexpected obstacle, the first thing you looked for was not the loudest danger. It was the thing that did not match the terrain. Mark's calm did not match the night before. He moved around our kitchen with practiced ease, opening cabinets, rinsing mugs, humming softly under his breath while my mind kept returning to the words I had seen on that folder. Emergency capital transfer pending. I wanted to ask him again. I wanted to place the folder on the table and say, "Tell me what this is, before I decide what it means." But marriage teaches you terrible negotiations with yourself. You tell yourself timing matters. You tell yourself people deserve privacy. You tell yourself suspicion is a kind of betrayal. So I drank my coffee and waited for him to speak first. He did, eventually. "Ryan's company is going through a short-term cash issue," he said, without looking at me. "Nothing dramatic. Startups have gaps." I kept both hands around my mug. "Why was Bennett Medical Systems paperwork in your study at 2 a.m? His jaw moved once. "Because he asked me to review something." "Financial documents?" "Claire." My name sounded like a warning in his mouth. "I know how you get when business comes up." "How do I get?" "You interrogate people." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because the word was so unfair it lost its shape. Asking what my husband was doing with emergency transfer paperwork in the middle of the night was not interrogation, it was marriage. "If Ryan needs money," I said carefully, "that is something we should discuss before anything is promised." Mark set his cup down too hard. Coffee jumped over the rim. "There it is. There what is. Permission, approval, command authorization." He laughed once, cold and short. "You do not know how to stop being Lieutenant Colonel Bennett." That sentence should not have hurt as much as it did. I had been proud of that title. I had earned it in crowded supply rooms, airless command centers, hurricane shelters, desert staging areas, and conference calls where nobody cared how tired I was as long as the shipment landed. But when Mark said it, he made it sound like a defect, some hardened part of me that had followed him home and ruined the furniture. "I am your wife," I said. "Then act like it." He regretted it immediately. I saw that much. His face softened, then tightened again, because apology would have required him to admit he had crossed a line. Before either of us could say another word, the front door opened. Patricia had let herself in with the spare key we had given her years earlier after her hip surgery. It had been meant for emergencies. Somehow, over time, her convenience had become an emergency. "Good, you're both here," she said, carrying a paper bag from a bakery as if she had arrived to brighten the morning. Then she saw Mark's face and mine, and her expression shifted into the one I had come to dread, concern arranged like evidence. "What happened?" Mark rubbed his eyes. "Claire thinks Ryan is trying to steal from us." "I never said that." Patricia looked at me the way people look at a dog that has snapped at a child. "Ryan is family." "So am I." The words came out before I could stop them. For a moment, nobody moved. Patricia's eyebrows lifted slightly. Mark looked away. That was when I understood something I had not allowed myself to name. In that room, family did not mean all of us. It meant the Bennetts by blood, and I was still, after nearly 30 years, the woman who had married in. Patricia set the bakery bag on the counter. "Claire, men need to make decisions without being treated like criminals." I stared at her. "Your son is moving money behind my back. You do not know that." "Then let him explain it." Mark said nothing. Patricia turned to him with a tenderness she had never wasted on me. "You do not have to defend yourself every minute of your life." He exhaled like a man who had finally been understood. I remember the strange sensation in my chest then, not pain exactly, but pressure, a heavy inward push. I put one hand on the counter until it passed. Patricia noticed. Her eyes narrowed. "There it is again." "What?" I asked. The dramatic pause. Mark said, "Mom, don't." But his voice was weak. Patricia folded her arms. "Every serious conversation ends with Claire not feeling well." I should have shouted. I should have told her that a woman who had organized emergency blood shipments under generator light did not need to fake breathlessness to win an argument in her own kitchen. Instead, I walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed until my pulse slowed. That afternoon, I drove to see Sonia Alvarez. Sonia had been a major when I was still learning how to survive senior officers who thought logistics happened by magic. She had served as an army nurse before moving into medical operations, and she possessed the rare gift of seeing both systems and people clearly. We met at a small cafe near Fort Sam Houston, the kind of place where half the customers had military haircuts and the other half pretended not to listen when old soldiers talked. Sonia stood when I came in, and before I reached the table, Her smile disappeared. Sit down. Hello to you too, Claire. She pulled out the chair. Sit. I obeyed because Sonia had spent too many years telling colonels when they were about to make themselves useless by being stubborn. She studied my face, then my hands. How long have you been this pale? I'm not pale. You walked from the door to this table like the floor was moving. I haven't been sleeping. That is not what I asked. The waitress came. Sonia ordered coffee for herself and herbal tea for me, which was how I knew she was worried. When we were alone, I told her everything. Ryan's company, Patricia's comments, Mark's late-night laptop, the transfer folder, the way my symptoms seemed to appear whenever stress rose. I expected her to focus on the money first. She did not. When was your last cardiac workup? Sonia, answer me. I had a retirement physical. A real cardiac workup, Claire. I looked out the window at a young soldier crossing the parking lot with a paper bag in one hand and a phone in the other. No final reason for one. Chest pressure is a reason. Shortness of breath is a reason. Fatigue that changes your daily life is a reason. Mark thinks it's stress. Mark is not a cardiologist. Patricia thinks I'm performing. Sonia's face hardened. Patricia would call a smoke alarm dramatic if it interrupted her dinner. I laughed despite myself, and for a few seconds I remembered what it felt like to be believed without having to present evidence. Then, Sonia reached across the table and took my hand. Listen to me. Make an appointment. Today. And about the financial documents, do not sign anything until an attorney reads it. An attorney? Yes. That feels extreme. No. Extreme is a husband hiding emergency transfer paperwork tied to his brother's company, while his mother trains everyone to see you as unstable. I pulled my hand back slowly. You think that is what she is doing? Sonia's voice softened. I think some families do not need a plan to destroy your credibility. They just repeat the same story until everyone, including you, starts believing it. I wanted to deny that. I wanted to say Mark would never let that happen. But I could still hear his laugh at dinner. You handled supplies, not business strategy. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived while Mark was at Ryan's office. Usually he collected the mail before I saw it, which I had begun to notice, only because Sonia had told me to notice everything. The mail carrier handed the envelope directly to me. It was from a financial institution that managed part of our retirement portfolio. I opened it at the kitchen island. At first, the language blurred into ordinary account terminology: authorization, liquidation, transfer, receiving entity, confirmation pending. Then the numbers sharpened. A large withdrawal had been requested from one of our joint accounts. The receiving entity was Bennett Medical Systems. At the bottom of the authorization page was my signature. Except it was not my signature. It had the correct shape from a distance, the same first letter sweep, the same slant on Bennett, the same confident line beneath the final T. But I knew my own hand. I had signed requisition forms, deployment approvals, controlled substance logs, emergency transport authorizations, casualty support paperwork, and retirement documents. I knew the rhythm of my name. This signature had been copied, not written. My body went cold from the inside out. I sat down slowly, because the room had tilted. For a moment, I heard Patricia's voice in my head. Dramatic pause. Then Sonia's voice came after it, stronger. Your body is not the liar here. I photographed every page. I placed the originals in a folder. Then I called Mark. He did not answer. I called again. Nothing. Finally, I called Sonia. She picked up on the second ring, breathless, as if she had been walking quickly. Tell me. Someone signed my name. Silence. Then, how much? I told her. She swore softly. Do not confront him alone. He is my husband, Claire. Her voice sharpened. Do not confuse history with safety. I closed my eyes. What do I do? You make copies. You call Rachel Kim. She was JAG before family law. I'll text you her number. She paused, and in the background I heard traffic, a car horn, the low rush of wind against her phone. And Claire? Yes. Look for Ryan's vendor certification file. If Bennett Medical Systems is trying to touch military health contracts, there will be claims, numbers, testing records, something. If they are desperate enough to forge your name, there is more underneath. The line crackled. Sonia, are you driving? Walking to my car. She took a strange breath. Just promise me, do not sign anything else. And do not let them push you out of that house before you find the Ryan file. I promise. Another pause came, too long this time. Sonia? I heard a faint sound. like the phone scraping against pavement. Then a younger woman's voice, far away, panicked. "Mom? Mom?" The call disconnected. I stood in my kitchen with the forged signature in front of me, and my phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence, not yet understanding that the only person who had fully believed me had just fallen before she could tell me what she had already discovered. For a few seconds after the call disconnected, I did not move. The kitchen was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock Patricia had given us one Christmas, a gift I had never liked but never removed because marriage is full of small compromises that later feel like evidence. I stared at my phone, then at the forged signature on the transfer authorization, then back at my phone. I called Sonia again. No answer. I called a third time. This time, a young woman picked up, crying so hard I could barely understand her. It was Marisol, Sonia's daughter. "Aunt Claire, she fell in the parking lot. They're taking her to Methodist. I don't know what happened." I remember saying calm words because calm words were what people needed in emergencies. I told her to breathe. I told her to ride with the ambulance if they allowed it. I told her I was coming. Then I placed the forged documents in a folder, locked them in the small fireproof safe where I kept my discharge papers and military records, and drove to the hospital with my hands so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles ached. Sonia was in emergency imaging when I arrived. Marisol stood near the nurse's station looking like a child again, though she was 32 and had 2 children of her own. She fell into my arms the moment she saw me. "She was talking to you?" I nodded. "About what?" I hesitated. There are moments when truth must wait its turn behind survival. "She was worried about me," I said. "That sounds like Mom." Sonia had suffered a stroke. Not the kind that stole everything, thank God, but serious enough that the doctors admitted her immediately and warned us that recovery would be slow. When I finally saw her, she was awake but exhausted, one side of her face slightly slack, her speech thick around the edges. She looked furious about it, which comforted me more than any doctor could have. Sonia Alvarez had always treated weakness as an administrative error she intended to correct. I sat beside her bed and took her hand. "You scared me." Her mouth moved slowly. "Good. Maybe now you'll listen." I tried to smile, but my eyes filled. "You are in a hospital bed and still giving orders. Someone has to." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again with effort. "Rachel Kim. I have her number. Call." "I will. Today." I nodded. "Today." She squeezed my hand with what strength she had. "Ryan file. You said that on the phone." Her eyes sharpened. "Vendor claims. Testing. Certifications. If fake, dangerous." The words cost her. A nurse stepped in and told me she needed rest. I wanted to ask more, but Sonia had already given me enough to understand the shape of the danger. This was no longer only about a forged signature or a desperate husband trying to help his brother. If Bennett Medical Systems had exaggerated certifications for medical equipment, and if Mark had used our retirement money to support that, then the problem was not merely financial. In the world I came from, a false certification could shut down an operating room, spoil blood, break a sterile chain, or put a medic in front of a patient with equipment that failed when seconds mattered. That night, I called Rachel Kim from the hospital parking garage. She answered with the measured voice of someone who had heard every version of human betrayal and no longer wasted surprise on it. Sonia had texted her before the stroke, apparently, with only 3 words: "Claire Bennett. Urgent." Rachel asked me to come in the next morning and bring everything. Everything means the forged document, account statements, emails, texts, company names, names of relatives, and any medical records you have. "Medical records?" I asked. "Your friend said they are trying to paint you as unstable." I looked through the windshield at the concrete wall in front of me. "Yes, then your health is part of the case whether you want it to be or not." The next morning, I sat in Rachel Kim's office with 2 folders and a heart that would not settle. Rachel was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with dark hair pulled into a low bun and a manner so controlled it reminded me of senior JAG officers who could dismantle a room without raising their voices. She did not interrupt while I talked. She made notes. She read the transfer authorization twice. Then she put it down and looked at me. "Did you sign this?" "No. Are you absolutely certain?" "I have signed my name under worse pressure than this. I know my own signature." She nodded once. Good. Good that you are certain. Bad that someone close enough to access your records may have copied it. She asked about Mark, Ryan, Patricia, the company, the dinner conversation, the folder I had seen, the emergency capital transfer. When I told her about my chest pressure and Patricia calling it drama, Rachel's face did not change, but her pen stopped moving. Have you seen a cardiologist? Not yet. Make the appointment. Everyone keeps saying that, because everyone not trying to discredit you can see that you need one. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Rachel leaned back. Claire, I'm going to be direct. If your husband's side believes they can frame you as controlling, unstable, and medically manipulative, they will use that to explain away every legitimate question you ask. The money will become your paranoia. The forged signature will become your confusion. Your symptoms will become theater. We need records before they build a story strong enough to bury the facts. You think Mark would do that? I asked, though by then I was not sure whether I wanted reassurance or the truth. Rachel's expression softened slightly. I think frightened people do things they later claim they never meant to do. She filed emergency requests to preserve financial records before anything could be deleted. She sent letters to the bank and to Mark's attorney, though Mark had not yet admitted he had one. That changed 2 days later when a courier arrived at the house with a thick envelope addressed to me. Inside was a petition for divorce. I read the first page standing in the foyer, my purse still over my shoulder, the house around me suddenly unfamiliar. Mark had filed first. Irreconcilable differences, emotional volatility, financial obstruction, pattern of controlling behavior. I sat down on the bottom stair and read those phrases until they stopped looking like words and became something heavier. Not because the marriage was ending. Some part of me had known it was already ending. What stunned me was the preparation. While I had been trying to decide whether suspicion made me a bad wife, Mark had been building a legal version of me that strangers could dislike. He came home an hour later and found me there with the papers in my lap. For one moment, real pain crossed his face. I did not want you to get them like this. How did you want me to get them? He set his keys on the table. Claire, did you forge my signature? His eyes flickered. That was all. One flicker. In logistics, you learn that small deviations reveal the failure point before the system collapses. It was temporary, he said. That is not an answer. Ryan needed bridge capital. From our retirement account? From a joint asset. With my forged signature. His voice rose. You would not listen. I stood slowly. So you committed fraud because I asked questions. I was trying to save my brother's company. And what were you trying to do with me? He looked away. The silence between us answered more honestly than he could. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later, as if she had been waiting nearby for the signal. She walked into the living room and went straight to Mark's side. This is exactly what I feared. I almost laughed. You feared your son would forge my name? I feared you would push him until he had no options. Rachel had warned me not to argue without a witness. But some wounds pull words out before wisdom can stop them. He had the option not to steal. Patricia's face hardened. There it is. The military prosecutor. No mercy, no understanding, just punishment. Mark said, Mom, stop. But again, weakly. Always weakly when it mattered. Over the next 3 weeks, my life divided into appointments. Rachel's office, bank calls, a handwriting expert, my primary care doctor, blood work, an EKG, a referral to cardiology. Another referral after the first doctor saw something he did not like but would not define yet. Every time a test came back inconclusive, Mark's attorney used it like proof. His filings described my medical complaints as conveniently timed. Patricia submitted a written statement saying, I had a long history of using physical discomfort to avoid accountability. Ryan claimed I was trying to destroy his business because I resented men succeeding outside military structure. I read those statements in Rachel's office with my hands shaking so badly she quietly slid a glass of water toward me. They are trying to make the judge see you before he sees the evidence, she said. Then what do? We make the evidence louder. She issued subpoenas for Bennett Medical Systems, Ryan's vendor certifications, internal emails, and all financial transfers connected to our accounts. Mark's side objected to nearly everything. That told Rachel more than compliance would have. People do not fight this hard over clean records, she said. Late one evening, while Sonia was still learning to speak clearly again, Marisol called me from her mother's hospital room. Mom wants me to read something to you. Sonia had written a few uneven words on a notepad. Marisol read them slowly. Check deleted email. Mark. Ryan. Mother. Unstable before hearing. The next day, Rachel's forensic technician recovered part of an email chain from a shared home backup I had almost forgotten existed. The message was from Ryan to Mark, with Patricia copied. Only one full sentence survived, but it was enough to make the room go silent. If Claire refuses to settle, Mom can testify that she has been unstable for months. Rachel printed it, placed it in a clear sleeve, and looked at me for a long moment. This was not a misunderstanding. I thought that discovery would make me feel stronger. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. It is one thing to be betrayed in anger. It is another to see betrayal organized in writing. Before I left her office, Rachel handed me another envelope. This came through a military contact of mine. Do you know anything about a Defense Health Agency medical readiness conference next month? I shook my head. No. Your name appears on the program. As what? Rachel's eyes moved across the page, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked almost surprised. Not as a guest, Claire. As an honoree. The morning of the hearing, I woke before sunrise with the strange clarity that sometimes comes before a storm. The house was quiet because Mark had moved into the guest room weeks earlier, though neither of us said the word separation when we passed each other in the hallway like strangers trying not to disturb the air. I dressed slowly in a navy suit I had worn to promotion boards and retirement ceremonies, not because I wanted to look impressive, but because I needed the fabric to remind me that I had once known how to stand in rooms where people questioned my judgment. My hands trembled when I fastened the buttons. That bothered me more than the chest pressure, more than the fatigue, more than the pale face looking back from the mirror. Trembling felt like surrender, and I was not ready to give Patricia that satisfaction. Rachel had told me to meet her outside the courtroom at 8:30. Do not engage with them in the hallway, she had said. Do not answer accusations. Do not try to explain yourself to people who are preparing to misunderstand you. That was good legal advice and almost impossible emotional advice, because a person can spend 27 years making battlefield decisions and still be tempted to defend herself to a mother-in-law who never truly wanted the truth. When I arrived at the courthouse, Mark was already there with Patricia and Ryan. Patricia wore pearl earrings and a cream blazer, dressed as if she were the grieving widow of a marriage instead of one of the people who had helped bury it. Ryan stood beside her scrolling on his phone, jaw tight, expensive shoes tapping against the tile. Mark looked thinner. For 1 second, our eyes met, and I saw something like shame flicker there. Then Patricia touched his arm, and he turned away. Rachel arrived carrying 2 binders and a leather folder. Breathe, she said. I am. No, you are holding your breath like you are waiting for impact. She was right. I forced air into my lungs, but it did not go as deep as it should have. The pressure in my chest had been there since breakfast, low and dull, the kind of discomfort I had learned to hide because every visible sign became ammunition. Inside the courtroom, Judge Whitmore sat beneath the seal with the tired patience of a man who had watched families turn private grief into public warfare for too many years. The first motions were procedural. Mark's attorney, a polished man named Victor Hale, argued that my requests for additional financial discovery were excessive, punitive, and designed to delay resolution. Rachel stood and answered calmly that forged signatures, undisclosed transfers, and vendor records tied to marital assets were not delay tactics. They were central facts. The judge listened, made notes, and allowed limited testimony before ruling further. That was when Patricia was called. She walked to the witness stand like a woman accepting a civic award. Her voice was soft when she swore to tell the truth, which somehow made everything worse. Victor began gently. Mrs. Bennett, how long have you known Claire? Nearly 30 years. And during that time, have you had the opportunity to observe her personality, her behavior, and her relationship with your son? Patricia lowered her eyes. Very much so. How would you describe her? She sighed in a way that made several people in the room lean in. Capable. Very capable. But difficult. Claire has always needed control. The army rewarded that in her, I suppose. But marriage is not a command post. I felt Rachel's hand touch my sleeve beneath the table, a silent warning not to react. Victor asked about my health. Patricia shook her head with manufactured sadness. I do not want to sound cruel. But whenever Claire is confronted, suddenly she is unwell. A headache? Chest pressure? Exhaustion. It always appears when Mark needs her to be reasonable. The words passed through me slowly. as if my body needed time to understand that someone could sit under oath and turn pain into strategy. Rachel's cross-examination was precise. She asked Patricia whether she was a physician. No. Whether she had attended any of my appointments. No. Whether she had seen my medical tests. No. Whether she had referred to my symptoms as drama before the divorce filings. Patricia hesitated. I may have used that word casually. Rachel then showed her the recovered email sentence about testifying that I had been unstable. Patricia's face changed only slightly, but I saw it. So did the judge. Did you discuss describing Claire as unstable before this hearing? Rachel asked. Patricia folded her hands tighter. We discussed concerns. Concerns or strategy? Victor objected. The judge sustained it, but the question had already done its work. Then Ryan testified. He presented himself as a hard-working entrepreneur unfairly attacked by a bitter sister-in-law who did not understand innovation. He said Bennett Medical Systems had promising products, private investors, and preliminary interest from medical networks. Rachel asked whether any marital funds had been transferred to his company. Ryan said he was not aware of all funding sources. She asked whether his cold-chain containers had military-grade certification. He said the testing process was ongoing. So when you represented them as field-ready, that was not accurate? Victor objected again. The judge allowed Ryan not to answer fully, but he looked irritated now. Mark was called after Ryan. I thought I was prepared. I was not. He did not sound angry. He sounded wounded, and that was more dangerous. He said he loved me, but could no longer live under suspicion. He said I questioned every decision. He said retirement had changed me. He said I treated normal family support for Ryan as if it were criminal behavior. Victor asked whether I had used health complaints to postpone difficult conversations. Mark looked down. I do not know what she felt physically. I only know the timing was always the same. There it was. Not an accusation exactly. Something worse. A door left open for strangers to walk through. When Rachel rose, she led him through the financial timeline, the transfer request, the forged signature, the email, the divorce petition filed after I found the document. Mark's answers grew smaller. I was trying to help my brother. Did Claire authorize that help? Not formally. Did she sign the transfer? Silence. Mr. Bennett? I believe she would have agreed if she understood. Rachel paused. That was not my question. His face reddened. No. The courtroom shifted. A tiny movement, almost nothing, but I had spent my career reading rooms. People had heard him. Still, Victor recovered quickly. When I was called, he moved with the smooth confidence of someone who knew that facts could be softened if the witness looked fragile enough. I took the oath, sat down, and tried to keep my breathing even. Rachel guided me first. My Army career, my logistics work, the retirement accounts, the signature, the symptoms, the appointments still pending. For a few minutes, I felt steady. Then Victor approached. Mrs. Bennett, you have no final cardiac diagnosis, correct? Not yet, my doctors are still evaluating me. But you have repeatedly claimed serious symptoms. I have reported symptoms that became more prominent as this divorce became more contentious? Rachel objected. The judge allowed me to answer. Stress made them worse. That does not make them false. Victor nodded as if I had helped him. And stress also makes people emotional, does it not? It can. Confused? Sometimes. Angry? Yes. Controlling? Rachel stood. Objection. Sustained. But I could feel the trap closing. Victor did not need to prove I was lying. He only needed to make me seem uncertain enough that my certainty about the money could be questioned. He asked about Sonia, about Rachel, about whether military service had made me distrust civilian business, about whether I had ever disagreed with Ryan's company in front of the family. I answered as evenly as I could, but the pain in my chest had sharpened. At first, I told myself it was anxiety. Then my left arm began to feel strange, not numb exactly, but distant. The room seemed too bright. Victor was still speaking when Patricia suddenly rose from the gallery. Your Honor, this is exactly what she does. The judge's head snapped up. Mrs. Bennett, sit down. But Patricia's voice rose. She is using this illness as an excuse. She has done it for months. She is faking it. Gasps moved through the room. Mark turned toward her, then toward me. I tried to speak. I wanted to say, I am not. Such a small sentence, such an important one. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. The pressure in my chest became a crushing force. as if steel bands had tightened around my ribs. I gripped the edge of the witness stand. The wood felt slick beneath my fingers. Rachel was on her feet. "Claire?" The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett?" I saw Mark stand. I saw Patricia's mouth still open. I saw Ryan stop tapping his foot. Then the courtroom tilted sideways. My knees gave out before I understood I was falling. A man moved from the second row with a speed that did not belong to spectators. Brigadier General Dr. Samuel Reeves, retired Army physician, caught my shoulder before my head struck the floor. "I am a physician," he said, already kneeling beside me. His fingers found my pulse. His expression changed almost instantly. "Call 911. The bailiff froze for half a breath. Dr. Reeves looked up, voice cutting through the room. "Call 911 now." Judge Whitmore stood so abruptly his chair rolled back. "Bailiff, call emergency services. Clear the area." Mark rushed forward. Dr. Reeves lifted one hand without looking away from me. "Stay back." Mark stopped. "What is happening?" Dr. Reeves checked my breathing, then looked toward the bench. "She is in cardiac distress." The room went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not polite silence, not courtroom silence, but the stunned quiet of people realizing they had been watching someone drown while debating whether the water was real. Patricia's face had gone white. Victor Hale had stepped back from the witness stand. Rachel was beside me, saying my name, her voice controlled but frightened. As the sirens grew louder outside, Dr. Reeves spoke again, this time lower but still clear enough for everyone to hear. "And for the record, Your Honor, Lieutenant Colonel Bennett is not just a supply officer. Half the military medical community in this city knows exactly what she did." I wanted to ask what he meant. I wanted to ask how he knew me. But the lights above the courtroom stretched into white lines, the voices drifted far away, and the last thing I saw before everything disappeared was Mark looking at me as if he had finally understood that disbelief could become its own kind of violence. I woke to the sound of machines before I understood that the machines were connected to me. A steady beep, a soft rush of air, rubber soles moving across polished floors. Someone speaking in a low voice outside a curtain. For a moment, I thought I was in a field hospital again, half asleep on a cot after too many hours of emergency coordination, waiting for a nurse to tell me another pallet had arrived or another generator had failed. Then I opened my eyes and saw the ceiling tiles, the IV pole, the cardiac monitor, and Rachel Kim sitting in a chair beside my bed with her suit jacket folded across her lap and both hands wrapped around a paper cup she had clearly forgotten to drink from. She stood the moment she saw me. "Claire." Her voice was quiet, but I heard the relief in it. I tried to answer. My throat felt raw. "Court?" It was the first word I managed, which tells you something about how deeply a person can be trained to worry about the wrong battlefield. Rachel leaned closer. "Court can wait." I turned my head slightly. Pain moved through my chest, not sharp anymore, but heavy, like a bruise inside the bone. "What happened?" Rachel's face softened in a way I had not seen before. She was always composed, always strategic, but sitting in that hospital room, she looked less like my attorney and more like someone who had watched a human being nearly disappear in front of her. "You had a serious cardiac event during the hearing, Doctor. Reeves stabilized you until EMS arrived." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised. Some part of me had known. The body knows the truth before pride admits it. Still, hearing it spoken plainly made tears slide down my temples into my hair. So I was not imagining it. Rachel did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was firmer. "No, Claire, you were not imagining it." Those words broke something open inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet collapse of months of being told that pain was stress, that breathlessness was attention, that my body was performing for sympathy. I had survived deployments, command pressure, emergency operations, storms, shortages, and the long loneliness of military marriage, but nothing had made me feel as small as begging people who claimed to love me to believe that something was wrong. Later that afternoon, my cardiologist came in with a calm face and a tablet full of results. He explained that I had an underlying cardiac condition that had likely been worsening for months. Stress had not invented it, but stress had pushed it harder. He used careful language, the kind doctors use when they want to be honest without frightening the patient into another emergency. More testing would be needed. Medication would start immediately. Cardiac rehabilitation would be part of recovery. I would need rest, real rest, not the version where I pretended sitting down for 10 minutes counted as healing. I listened, nodded, asked practical questions, then stared at the blanket after he left because the practical questions were easier than the emotional one. How close had I come to dying in front of people who thought I was acting? Sonia called that evening through Marisol's phone. Her speech was still slow, but every word carried the old authority. "You alive?" I laughed, then winced. "Apparently. Good. Annoying if you died before listening." I listened. Late. Yes. There was a pause. I could hear Marisol whispering something in the background, probably telling her mother not to overdo it. Sonia ignored her, naturally. "Your body told truth. Remember that." I pressed the phone closer. "I will." "No. Say it." My throat tightened. "My body told the truth." "Good." She breathed heavily for a second. "Now let Rachel fight. You heal." That was harder than it sounded. Healing requires trust, and trust had become a language I no longer spoke fluently. The next morning, Brigadier General Dr. Samuel Reeves visited my room. He was not in uniform, just a gray blazer, white shirt, and dark slacks, but he carried himself with the unmistakable stillness of senior military medicine. Some people enter a room and take space. Others enter and steady it. Dr. Reeves steadied it. "Lieutenant Colonel Bennett," he said, "you gave everyone quite a scare. I seem to be collecting embarrassing public moments." He pulled a chair beside the bed. "Collapsing from cardiac distress is not embarrassing. Ignoring a patient in distress because it is inconvenient would be embarrassing." I looked away. They thought I was faking. "I know. You said something in court." He waited. "About people knowing what I did." A faint smile appeared. "Yes, I did." "How do you know me?" He leaned back, folding his hands. "Gulf Coast Emergency Response. 8 years ago, Hurricane Callista. The field hospital outside Corpus Christi lost primary power. 2 access roads flooded, and a refrigerated blood shipment was rerouted twice before anyone realized the backup depot did not have compatible storage. I was attached to Regional Medical Command then. Your logistics plan was the only reason that hospitals stayed functional through the next 72 hours. I stared at him. I remembered Callista. Of course I remembered it. I remembered wet boots, failing generators, fuel calculations, helicopter availability, a map covered in grease pencil, 3 hours of sleep across 2 days, and a young captain crying with relief when the blood units finally arrived cold and viable. But I had never thought of it as something anyone would remember by my name. It had been one disaster among many, one problem solved because unsolved problems kill people. "I was doing my job," I said. Dr. Reeves nodded. "Most people who save lives in medical logistics say that." He reached into his jacket and removed a folded program. "The Defense Health Agency is hosting a medical readiness conference next month at Fort Sam Houston. One portion of the event is recognizing behind-the-lines leadership during domestic emergency response. Your name was submitted before any of this court matter happened." I looked at the program but did not take it. Submitted by whom? Several people, apparently, including one surgeon who said he operated for 36 hours during Callista because you kept his operating tents supplied. My chest hurt then in a different way, not medically, humanly. There are years when you do the work, sign the forms, solve the shortage, answer the midnight call, and believe nobody remembers because nobody has time to remember. Then suddenly someone tells you that a life continued because you did not let a truck take the wrong road, and the past rearranges itself. I took the program with unsteady hands. My name was printed under the words Medical Logistics, Leadership Recognition. Claire Bennett, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired. I read it 3 times. Mark always said people like me only moved boxes. Dr. Reeves' expression did not change, but his voice cooled. People who say that have never watched a surgeon open an empty cabinet during a mass casualty event. Rachel came later that day with news that felt almost too heavy for the hospital room. Judge Whitmore had postponed the divorce proceedings indefinitely pending my medical stabilization. But he had also ordered expanded discovery based on Mark's admission under oath and the recovered email. The bank had frozen the disputed transfer. A forensic document examiner had been formally retained. Bennett Medical Systems was being required to produce vendor certification records, testing documents, investor communications, and any contracts or proposals that referenced my name, Mark's funds, or military medical readiness. "My name?" I asked. Rachel opened her folder and slid a page onto the tray table. "We found an early proposal draft. It describes Bennett Medical Systems as having strategic advisory access to retired Army medical logistics leadership." I stared at the sentence. They meant me. Yes. I never advised them. I know. A cold anger moved through me, quieter than rage, and much more useful. Ryan had mocked my career in public while using the shadow of it in paperwork. Mark had called my questions control while letting my reputation help his brother's company look credible. Patricia had called my illness theater while participating in an email chain designed to make a judge believe I was unstable. There are betrayals that burn because they are emotional, and there are betrayals that freeze because they are organized. This one did both. Mark tried to visit on the third day. Rachel was there when the nurse asked if I wanted him allowed in. I watched the nurse's face carefully. She had no history with us, no loyalty, no opinion, just a question. Did I want him in the room? For nearly 30 years, I had answered versions of that question without knowing it. Did I want to keep the peace? Did I want to make Patricia comfortable? Did I want to let Mark explain before I let myself feel hurt? This time, the answer came slowly but clearly. No, not today. Rachel nodded once, not approving exactly, just witnessing. Mark left flowers anyway. White lilies. I asked the nurse to give them to the chapel. Patricia came the following day and cried in the hallway until Marisol, who had come to visit me after seeing Sonia, told her with impressive calm that hospital corridors were not stages. I did not see Patricia either, not because I hated her. Because my heart, quite literally, had survived enough pressure. On the fourth day, Dr. Reeves returned with another copy of the conference program and one additional detail. Bennett Medical Systems was listed as a prospective vendor for a small technology showcase attached to the same event. Ryan had been trying to get his equipment in front of Defense Health Agency officials. Does he know I am being honored there? I asked. Dr. Reeves looked at me over his glasses. If he read the updated program, he does. Rachel, standing near the window, closed her folder. Then he may come expecting opportunity. I looked down at my own name printed in formal type, then at the monitor drawing green lines beside my bed, proof that my heart was still working, still telling the truth. And what will he find instead? Rachel's expression was calm, but there was steel beneath it. If the records say what I think they say, he will find accountability in a room full of the very people he tried to impress. That night, after everyone left, I lay awake listening to the monitor and thinking about field hospitals, signatures, storms, and the strange mercy of being forced to stop before I disappeared completely. I had entered that courtroom trying to prove I was not unstable, not dishonest, not dramatic, not merely a supply officer. But the next room I would enter was not a courtroom. It was a hall filled with military doctors, nurses, commanders, logisticians, and officials who understood what Patricia and Ryan never had. In medicine, the person who moves the box may be the reason someone lives long enough to open their eyes. The conference hall at Fort Sam Houston looked nothing like a courtroom, and yet when I stepped through the doors, my body remembered how it felt to be judged. The ceilings were high, the lights warm, the stage dressed with flags and blue banners that read Medical Readiness Leadership Forum. Uniformed officers moved in small clusters near the registration tables, shaking hands, exchanging brief professional smiles, carrying folders and coffee cups. Civilian medical leaders stood beside Army nurses, hospital administrators, logistics officers, and Defense Health Agency staff. It should have felt familiar. It should have felt safe. Instead, I stood near the entrance with Rachel on one side and Dr. Reeves on the other, feeling the faint pull of my healing heart beneath the tailored jacket I had chosen because it hid the medical monitor still taped near my ribs. My cardiologist had cleared me to attend for a limited time, with strict instructions to sit when needed, take medication on schedule, and avoid unnecessary stress. I had almost laughed when he said that. Stress was not unnecessary that morning. It was seated somewhere inside that hall, wearing my husband's face. Mark had arrived with Patricia and Ryan 20 minutes before me. I saw them near the vendor showcase, where Ryan was pretending confidence with the desperation of a man watching a door close but still smiling at the handle. He wore a dark suit, his badge clipped too high on his lapel, Bennett Medical Systems printed beneath his name. Patricia stood beside him in pale blue, expression composed, though her eyes kept moving across the room. Mark saw me first. He did not come over. He simply froze for half a second, long enough for Patricia to follow his gaze. The last time she had seen me, I had been on the courtroom floor with paramedics around me. Now I was standing in a room full of military medical professionals who did not need anyone to explain the difference between drama and distress. That alone changed the air between us. Rachel leaned slightly toward me. Remember why you are here. I looked at the stage. I am trying. No, she said softly. You are not here to prove yourself to them. You are here because people who know the work asked you to stand where you belong. That helped. Not completely, but enough. The first hour passed in panels and formal remarks. I sat near the front with Dr. Reeves while Rachel excused herself to speak with two officials connected to procurement oversight. I did not ask what she was doing. By then, I had learned that Rachel did not move without a reason. Ryan's company table stood near the back beside a small display of portable diagnostic units and cold chain transport containers with glossy labels promising field-ready reliability. I watched several officers glance at the equipment but not stop long. Ryan noticed that too. His smile tightened each time someone walked past. Patricia whispered to Mark more than once. Mark kept looking at me as though he wanted to say something and did not trust his own right to approach. Then the main recognition ceremony began. A major general welcomed everyone and spoke about the invisible systems behind visible medicine. He said combat medicine and disaster response were often remembered through the faces of surgeons, nurses, and medics, but no patient reached an operating table without fuel, transport, refrigeration, inventory, communication, and timing. Readiness is not a slogan, he said. It is a chain, and when one link fails, people suffer. I felt my throat tighten. Those were words I had spent 27 years living. Then the Army Surgeon General walked onto the stage. The room rose, applauded, and settled back into silence. She was a tall woman with a steady voice, the kind of leader who did not need volume to command attention. She spoke about domestic emergency response, about hurricanes, wildfires, overwhelmed hospitals, and military medical teams working beside civilian agencies. Then the screen behind her shifted to an old photograph of a field hospital under gray skies, canvas walls shining with rain, floodwater pooled around pallets, soldiers in ponchos moving crates beneath temporary lights. I knew the image before she said the name, Hurricane Callista. My hands tightened around the program. 8 years ago, the Surgeon General said, a regional field hospital supporting both service members and civilians came within hours of losing surgical capability. Roads were flooded, primary power failed, blood products were at risk, antibiotic reserves were critically low, several evacuation routes had collapsed. The medical team on the ground performed with extraordinary courage. But courage alone cannot replace oxygen regulators, viable blood, sterile instruments, fuel, water, or functioning refrigeration. The room was completely still. I could not see Mark, Patricia, or Ryan from where I sat, but I could feel the story moving toward them like weather. The Surgeon General continued. One officer rebuilt that supply chain under impossible conditions. She redirected cold chain transport through an alternate air-ground route, coordinated generator fuel delivery through a civilian partner, identified compatible blood storage at a backup facility no one else had considered, and kept that field hospital alive through the 72 hours that mattered most. The screen changed again. This time, it showed me in uniform, younger, rain on my face, hair pulled tight, standing over a map with 2 captains and a medic beside me. I heard a soft sound move through the audience, recognition from some, surprise from others. My own breath caught. I had forgotten that photograph existed. Today, the Surgeon General said, we recognize Lieutenant Colonel Claire Bennett, United States Army, retired, for medical logistics leadership that saved lives when the system was closest to breaking. Dr. Reeves touched my arm. Stand if you can. I stood. For a second, the room blurred. Not from illness this time. From the shock of being seen. The applause began politely, then grew as more people stood. Officers, nurses, logisticians, physicians, civilians. A standing ovation rolling through a hall full of people who understood. I looked toward the back and finally saw them. Ryan's face had gone hard and colorless. Patricia stood very still, one hand at her throat. Mark was on his feet, but he was not clapping at first. He was crying. Not dramatically. Not for show. Just quietly, like a man watching a door close on the version of himself he had tried to defend. Then the Surgeon General said the sentence I would remember for the rest of my life. Some people call this supply. In military medicine, we call it survival. The applause rose again, and something inside me let go. Not anger, not grief, something older than both. The part of me that had sat through family dinners being reduced to boxes and paperwork finally stood upright. I walked to the stage carefully. The Surgeon General shook my hand, then placed the recognition plaque in my palms. It was heavier than I expected. I looked out at the hall and did not search for Patricia. I did not search for Ryan. I did not even search for Mark. For once, I let the people who honored the work have my full attention. After the ceremony, the second reckoning came quietly, without speeches. 2 procurement officials and a legal compliance officer approached Ryan's vendor table with Rachel beside them. There was no public humiliation, no dramatic removal, no handcuffs. Real accountability often enters the room with folders, not sirens. Bennett Medical Systems showcase participation was suspended, pending review of certification claims, funding representations, and unauthorized use of my professional reputation in proposal materials. Ryan argued at first. Then Rachel opened a folder and placed one printed page on the table. I was too far away to read it, but I saw his shoulders drop. Patricia turned away, as if the wall had suddenly become interesting. Mark walked toward me then, stopping several feet away, respectful of the distance he had lost the right to cross casually. "Claire," he said. I waited. He looked at the plaque in my hands, then back at me. "I am sorry." In the past, I would have softened the moment for him. I would have said it was complicated, that Patricia influenced him, that Ryan pressured him, that fear makes people foolish. All of that may have been true, but truth does not erase responsibility. "You should have believed me," I said. His face crumpled. "I know. You should have protected our marriage before you protected your brother's lie." "I know." Patricia stood behind him, eyes red but dry. "Claire," she whispered. I did not understand. I looked at her for a long moment. "No, you did not want to." She lowered her head. That was enough. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first honest silence I had ever received from her. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. The forged transfer was reversed, the marital assets were divided fairly, and Bennett Medical Systems never received the opportunity Ryan had imagined. Whether criminal charges would come was left to people whose job was to decide such things. I stopped needing punishment to feel free. Mark sent one letter after the final hearing. It did not ask me to return. It did not blame his mother. It simply said he had confused loyalty with obedience and pride with love, and that the 2 seconds when he thought I was acting as I collapsed would haunt him forever. I believed that. I forgave him eventually, but I did not go back. Forgiveness is not a bridge to the place that broke you. Sometimes it is only the key that lets you leave without carrying the whole house on your back. I moved into a small townhouse not far from Sonia, who recovered enough to complain about everyone's driving and correct nurses half her age. I attended cardiac rehabilitation. I learned to rest without earning it first. Some mornings, I walked slowly through a community garden and listened to my own breath, as if it were music I had almost lost. Dr. Reeves later invited me to mentor younger medical logistics officers, and I said yes, because the work had never stopped mattering. It simply stopped being the only proof that I mattered. The first time I spoke to them, I held up no plaque. I told them about the field hospital, the forged signature, the courtroom floor, and the dangerous habit of dismissing quiet work because it does not look heroic from the outside. Then I told them what I wish someone had told my family years earlier. Never call another person's pain an excuse, just because you do not understand it. And never call someone just supply, when their unseen labor may be the reason someone else survives. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that quiet strength is still strength, invisible pain is still real, and the people working behind the scenes often carry more lives than anyone knows. And if you want more stories about resilience, family, justice, and healing after betrayal, subscribe and come back for the next one. Because sometimes the truth arrives late, but when it finally enters the room, everyone who laughed at it has to stand still and listen.